In today's Nonsense Wars production, we look at what we consider one of the best Technic sets of all time, the 1130 part 8479. One of the last traditional multi-sets and one of the largest, the $164 Barcode multi-set released in 1997 and featured 4 models. Unfortunately, I'm lying a bit in the title as we will cover the alt models in part 2. The core of the set, the CodePilot brick, makes programs by scanning barcodes and only came in this set, hence the name. 8479 has a relatively short-lived style of box with a top flap and a sealed lid. The inside of the flap shows basically all the features of the main model in a lovely classical Technic montage. The rear does the same for the B, C, and D models, though not nearly in as much detail. I really like the way LEGO put drivetrains and features on these old Technic boxes, and we unfortunately don't see much of that today. Aside from the CodePilot brick, 8479 doesn't have too many special parts, but it does have a considerable number of green ones, plates, joiners, and even axles. Even now, not too many Technic models have come with a lot of this color. Otherwise, the actual rare parts include touch sensors, clutch gears, a taco gear, more on that in part 2, and flex cables with folding ends. The main model actually uses said cables in the intended manner, transferring linear motion through arbitrary curves. The CodePilot brick itself looks much like the other programmable bricks of the era, the RCX and the Scout. It only has 2 connectors, one for motors and one for sensors, but it also has a barcode reader on the side. The bottom cover has what looks like some anti-studs, but they don't clutch well, and they don't accept half pins either. You can actually swap covers with the RCX or the Scout, but they won't let you slide rails down the sides as with the default base. This CodePilot brick actually had a bad stop button when we pulled it out of storage. We thought that the contacts might have corroded a bit, as with the Gigamesh, so we opened it up to take a look. After removing just 3 screws, we find a sparsely populated PCB dominated by a large speaker and overlaid with a surprisingly tall button membrane. Cleaning the contacts on the PCB and the membrane indeed fixed the issue. Somewhat related, this set also had both rotting wires and rotting stickers. When we put everything back together, we noticed something interesting. The logos on the motor and sensor ports look much older than the logos on the brick itself. LEGO used these electrical connectors on much older programmable bricks like the 1993 Control B, and they probably hadn't changed the molds since then. We would never see this today. These parts come from a time when LEGO was still transitioning from a small company into a big company. We program the CodePilot using the included sheet of barcodes. It has 3 types of codes: actions, magnitudes, and times, which we can chain together as part of a main routine or in response to touch sensor inputs. We'll cover programming in more detail in part 2, as we don't technically need to know anything about the barcodes. 4 special quote-unquote one-click codes load the entire default programs for each of the A, B, C, and D models. Moving on to the instructions. The book has 4 sections pertaining to the 4 models, but it remains relatively thin. A lot of steps and a lot of parts on average. We saw a handful of moderately weird things like this giant callout with a nested callout, but we also found a surprising number of errors. For example, this 1x6 plate can't actually shift by the half stud shown, and later this partially inserted 3-length pin looks like a 4-length pin. Minor mistakes for sure, but still noticeable. The main model itself also has some construction quirks, but probably fewer than the instructions themselves. Studded Technic sets had become pretty mature at this time. A couple assemblies don't fill gaps with bushings, but at least one of those connections really just needs the still not available double pin with axle hole. Another step has axles that seat only halfway into a hole, and another spot with odd spacing cleverly runs a gear train right between 2 vertical axles. The finished A model is a beautiful hybrid of studded and studless construction, something very few transition sets pull off well. We count 7 functions: rolling, steering wheel, variable driving sound, grasping a tire, flipping it into the bed, and tipping the bed. By default, the included motor drives the claw and bed, but we can switch it to the other side and drive the vehicle, despite the motor being hugely underpowered for the task. I'll include a clip with sounds at the end of the video. How do the 2 reversing functions work? The default program runs the motor forward and backward for a certain time period in response to a sensor hit. Both the under-actuated claw and the tipping bed take about the same time to cycle. The 2 clutch gears eat up any excess motor runtime, so neither drivetrain actually stalls. The claw responds to the front sensor, and the bed responds to a hidden sensor triggered by the function toggle, which also physically switches the motor output to the relevant mechanism. Very clever overall. The most amazing thing about this main model is just how well everything works. A huge step up over Cybermaster, Spybotics, and Robotics Discovery, where we had to tinker with so much stuff. Never mind the quality issues with the hardware. Those are their own problems. The polish of the model impressed us as kids, impressed us as adults, and strongly contribute to why we hold the set in such high regard. Anyway, that's the end of this video. Get subscribed for part 2, and have a nice day.